are both online at the moment, and so please sit down and we will start. Elizabeth, can you hear me?
I hear you well, Susan, as ever. I really wish we were all there in person. I'm really sad that I mucked up my dates and went running into the room to look you all last week.
Thank you.
But I can start whenever you want, Susan, to save Tzeporah time. Are there enough people in the room there for me to do the introduction?
Yes. Go right ahead. Everybody's listening. Ears are open.
It's a rare thing for me to be able to introduce. I think this is the first time ever, Tzeporah, that anyone's trusted me to introduce you, because I know you don't have a lot of time right now, and what I want to say about you could take hours, and I know you don't have hours. But I first met Tzeporah Berman in 1993 when she was a stalwart, courageous defender of the forests of Clayoquot Sound. She was singled out for arrest through a novel approach to try to convict her and give her jail time for conspiracy to violate an injunction that she never personally violated while organizing the Clayoquot Peace Camp. She's a champion of nonviolent, feminist, civil disobedience in defense of the earth, and she ended up, as right now, leading a charge globally, which is what she wants to talk about. And it was really, I think it's fair to say, Tzeporah, it was your brainchild, identifying fossil fuels as weapons of mass destruction and identifying them for a global treaty for fossil fuel non-proliferation. It's been launched over many years now. We've got over 600,000 supporters around the world. I was honored to be one of the first parliamentarians, along with my colleague Carolyn Lucas of the Green Party of England and Wales, to sign up, to step up, and to say this is the course we need to follow. I know Tzeporah is pressed for time. She's in New York. She's got some other diplomatic meetings to attend. So I'm just going to pass it over to Tzeporah just to say it's an honor to be in the same virtual space. No matter what, stands on principle and achieves results.
Oh, Elizabeth, thank you so much. I especially look at you from a train and all of it. You know, it seems like yesterday, actually, and a lifetime ago, of course. Less wrinkles than 31 years ago when we met. But Elizabeth was the most generous mentor. You know, I think about it a lot because a lot of young people talk to me now about what to do in the climate crisis, and the first time I came to Ottawa, I had never lobbied a politician, and I think I had some pretty naive ideas about good guys and bad guys, and I knew what side of the fence I was on, and I learned a lot just from the way that you built bridges with everyone you talked to and still do, and I think that's so important when we face these hard challenges. So thank you, Elizabeth. It was a great honor to be introduced by you. Before I dig in, I thought I might just show you a quick video. My team around the world has been working with some folks to put together a video to explain what we're trying to do together. The Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative is now endorsed and active endorsed by about 3,500 organizations, active in 117 countries. And it's been a bit like holding onto a rocket ship in a really good way. It's given me hope on these issues more than I've had in a really long time. But if you have the video there, folks, we could just run that first, and then I'll dig in.
Connections nourish us. It's what makes us human. They tie us to the land, to the air we breathe. But the climate crisis is threatening the very fabric of life.
Extreme weather, massive floods, temperatures soaring.
Thousands of people have been evacuated.
100,000 people have been evacuated.
And the culprit? Fossil fuels. We know they're poisoning our world. But instead of phasing out fossil fuels, many governments are ramping up. And it's time to quit.
Oil is now flowing through the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion.
Work will begin to extract crude from the Rosebank oil field.
We need an exit ramp off the highway to climb the
We need a new plan. We need a fossil fuel treaty. A global call to
stop the expansion of fossil fuels.
Phasing out fossil fuels to adjust an equitable transition.
We've stopped weapons of mass destruction before.
And today, a new historic treaty has been signed.
With a stroke of a pen. And we can do it again. Wealthy nations must move first and fastest. And other nations are already leading the way.
This treaty is imperative and monumental. We can no longer wait.
No hay otro camino.
To face down coal, oil, and gas.
Communities have stepped up, championing a movement all over the world. It's the connections we hold dear and that we're striving to protect that will ultimately save us. After all, we can't help it. It's what makes us human. Protect what you love.
Thank you so much for showing that video. I'm going to, once you're done, if you want to stop sharing, I'm going to share my screen. We don't have much time together today. I'm at the United Nations General Assembly during Climate Week and been meeting with countries here who are looking at joining the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative and meeting with many countries who are just trying to wrap their heads around what the barriers are to phasing down fossil fuel production and how to do it, how to cooperate to make that happen. The conversations are fascinating and it's really exciting, but it's always a little tricky when you have over 100 countries and prime ministers and ministers from 100 countries in one city. So it's been a pretty exciting and exhausting week, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. I wanted to back up and tell you where this idea came from and why those of us who are working on it think it's important, and reflect a little bit about the moment that we're in. So just do this. All right. Can you just see one image now and not all the other messiness? Someone's going to have to tell me that that's working.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Well, I want to start here, actually, in Hawaii, because earlier this year I was invited by the mayor and governor to come to Hawaii to Maui. Many of you will remember that last year there was a terrible fire in Lahaina. And it really, in a lot of ways, like the fires we've seen in Canada, came up very quickly and literally was a fireball chasing people down their streets. Many people died. And I talked when I was in Lahaina to some of the people who ran down that street and who ended up jumping into the ocean while they watched their town burn. These fires are not unusual now. They are, in fact, sweeping the planet. Excuse me, just one moment. I'm doing a keynote speech right now in this room. Thank you. That's the thing. There's a lot of people, a lot of meetings going on, a lot of things going on. So back to Lahaina. So. We know, of course, that there are fires sweeping our planet, and we hear about it all the time, but one of the things that I'm finding so horrifying is how normalized it's becoming for us. If you haven't lived it, if you haven't had to move or rebuild your home yet, or you haven't been in a situation where you're living in a place, for example, like many cities in this world in the last year that had no water, you have to wait for the water truck to come down your street and stand there with a container so you can get your kids water to drink. If you haven't had to live it, somehow we're very good at normalizing change. And in fact, the media now are barely reporting these disasters that happen literally constantly. So I want to give you a sense of what's happened in the last week, just in the last week. In West and Central Africa, especially Nigeria, over 1,000 people were killed as a result of the flooding, and hundreds of thousands since the beginning of the year have been displaced. Floods and landslides, again, just last week, triggered by Typhoon Yagi in Vietnam, killing 170, displacing 320,000 people, and leaving millions of children without access to education and food. In Central Europe, more than 20 deaths across Romania, Poland, Czech Republic, and Austria, with many others missing, part of a storm system that dumped 5 times September's average rainfall in 4 days. Wildfires, especially in large parts of the Amazon in Brazil. The number of fires this year in Brazil in 2024 overall has more than doubled compared with last year. And of course, many other fires around the world. That was this week. This year, 1.5 million people are migrating in the Mekong Delta due to salination as a result of sea level rise. They just don't have water to drink, so they're moving. 5 million livestock dropped dead in Mongolia due to record cold, and now millions of people are moving as well because they no longer have livelihoods. Papua New Guinea landslides buried 2,000 people, and I'm only looking at extreme weather right now. If you start to look at the impacts of fossil fuels on our health, you find out that fossil fuels are the greatest cause of premature death in the world. 7 million people died this year due to air pollution from fossil fuels alone. We can't let these things become normalized. I look at these images and I go to these places because I think it's part of our job. It's part of our job to bear witness, but to hold on to it and to remind people every day that every ton of carbon matters. So where are we today? I think it's also important to start with a quick look at where we are. So if you look at current policies today, we're at about commitments to be about 3.4 to 3.7 degrees. Pledges is probably closer to 2.7 degrees. Current trajectory for emissions, well over 4 degrees, heading towards 6 degrees. And our goal, a hard-fought goal, many people on this call, especially someone like Elizabeth May, know better than I do, 1.5. And even at 1.5, millions of people will die. Where are the big oil companies planning for? I thought that was really interesting, so I decided to chart it on this map. Most of the big oil companies around the world are planning for a 3 to 4 degree world. A 3 to 4 degree world means that huge swaths of the world are now uninhabitable due to lethal humidity, let alone the other concerns of extreme weather rising and floods and drought. Just lethal humidity alone will make most of the planet uninhabitable. Here in New York, I had a meeting the other day where I was told that I was being too ambitious, that I have to be more realistic about the time frames of the transition. And I think that's a really interesting word, realistic. I think planning for a world where the majority of the planet is habitable should be considered realistic. So look, climate policy and international agreements, they're complicated. But what's not complicated is that 86% of the emissions trapped in our atmosphere today, 86% come from 3 things: oil, gas, and coal. And for 30 years, we haven't been talking about fossil fuels. And that's been a plan. It's been a plan by the wealthiest and most profitable companies on Earth. The fossil fuel companies, just the oil and gas companies alone, have made $2.8 billion every day in profits, every single day for the last 50 years. They're the most profitable and most powerful industry on Earth. And right now, they're on track to produce 110% more oil, gas, and coal than we can ever burn if we want to stay below 1.5 degrees. So while our countries have been negotiating emissions targets and our countries have been debating policies to reduce the demand for oil, they've been allowing these companies to increase production. And in fact, the majority of production that is currently planned is in 2 countries. Let me say that again. The majority of the expansion of production that is currently planned of oil and gas on the planet in the next 10 years is in 2 countries, in Canada and the United States. Meanwhile, the IEA has said very clearly, as has the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that no new fossil fuel projects fit if we're going to meet Paris goals and reach net zero. No new projects fit. Why? Because we already have enough oil, gas, and coal either on the surface of the planet or under production to take us past 1.5 degrees if we burn it. In fact, we already have enough existing fossil fuel infrastructure to take us to 2 degrees. So I hear a lot that we need to just commit to renewables, that renewables will help us reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. And I think that's right. We need renewable energy. But I think this is something you need to understand. Even though we have built renewable energy at scale, and renewable energy is now cheaper than fossil fuels everywhere in the world, and it is dramatic the amount of renewable energy we're seeing being built around the world and the pickup of electric vehicles and electric cars. 10 years ago, 80% of the energy we used on this planet came from fossil fuels. Today, 80% of the energy we use on this planet comes from fossil fuels. So what does that mean? We're not just building more renewable energy, we're also building more fossil fuels. And what we build today will be what we use tomorrow. And that's why we can't just rely on demand-side policy and the Paris Agreement and emissions reductions. We need our countries to stop building the stuff that's killing us. Because the atmosphere doesn't care how many solar panels we build. The atmosphere cares how many fossil fuel projects we don't. So how do we do it? How do we actually stop production of fossil fuels, especially when there are so many countries that are so dependent on them? You're not going to be able to see the details of this slide, but the reason I put it up there is to reinforce the need for international cooperation in order to create new systems and structures to help countries slow down and stop the production of fossil fuels and manage an equitable wind down. Because if you look at this grid, what you see is that there are some countries that have so many huge challenges because fossil fuel export revenues, for example, are such a massive part of their GDP. Malaysia, it's about 65% of their GDP. If they just stopped expanding fossil fuels and shut production down, their hospitals literally would close. They need to find an off-ramp. So their off-ramp in production of fossil fuels, especially since they're one of the countries that didn't create the climate crisis, should be slower. Canada, however, is a wealthy nation, which does not have as great a dependency, despite the ads you're seeing from the fossil fuel industry. When you look at the stats, it's not while Alberta has significant challenges to reduce its dependence on fossil fuel production and ensure economic diversification and replace those export revenues, the country as a whole does not. How will Alberta do it? We will only know once we admit we need to stop expansion, not just cap emissions. We need to stop expansion of production and start managing a wind down. So we need a plan. A fossil fuel treaty is a plan for international cooperation, for countries to stand together and start to create equitable new rules. Why do we need a new global agreement? Because if we don't have one, it will make the transition harder. It will create greater delays, which cost us so much more every day. It will risk lock-in of new infrastructure, because when you build a 20 or is it now $30 billion pipeline like the Trans Mountain Pipeline, you don't build it for a year or two. You build it in order to ensure that you have that economic revenue coming in for decades. If we are still using that much oil in 10 years, in 20 years, then we know what that world looks like. And it's not a world in which future generations, my children, can survive. So we've heard a lot from the industry that we can just do carbon capture and storage, we can plant trees, and we continue fossil fuel production. Well, in the last year, We've seen numerous study after study, even from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, showing that the carbon capture and storage projects are underperforming by about 80%. The only thing that these oil companies are really good at capturing is politicians, not carbon. And they're using the idea of carbon capture and storage in order to justify their continued production and expansion in production of oil. Saying that we're tree planting and doing carbon capture and storage, or even a direct air capture, while continuing to expand oil drilling is like drinking carrot juice in the morning and then smoking a pack a day. They don't cancel each other out. The world doesn't work that way. We have to make hard choices. We need leaders that understand that in this moment in history, we need hard choices. So the International Energy Agency has already said that there is no need for investment in a fossil fuel supply in a net zero pathway. The UN Secretary General has said that investing in new fossil fuel infrastructure is moral and economic madness. Yet the Paris Agreement doesn't even include the words oil, gas, or coal, or fossil fuels. When I found that out, I thought I was crazy. When I worked as the co-chair of the Oil Sands Advisory Working Group, and I realized that even if we had a progressive government that believed in climate leadership, they just didn't see constraining production as their problem. We're just going to reduce emissions. We're going to continue to pump as much oil out as we can and send it out to the world. Every country wants to be the last barrel sold. Every company wants to be the last barrel sold. And so the result is we're on a trajectory to disaster. So 4 years ago, I started working with lawyers and diplomats and economists and Nobel laureates and scientists from around the world to create a solution, to call on countries to show leadership and to step up to the idea that we need a new companion agreement to the Paris Agreement. This idea isn't that new. Pacific Island nations called for a treaty to ban fossil fuels in 2016. So I went and met with Pacific nations, talked to Vanuatu and Tuvalu and Fiji about their leadership and what they thought about the idea of a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Could we get countries to agree and align with the science to say no new expansion, and that we will create new trade agreements, tax agreements, debt relief, ways to support each other in moving away from fossil fuels? Their answer was a resounding yes. So in COP26 in Glasgow, wait, I'm getting my COPs mixed up. So last year in Dubai, we were able to ensure, in part, the support of the movement around the world and the treaty network around the world, getting countries and individuals to call on the Dubai process to just acknowledge that we need a fossil fuel phase out. So for the first time ever, we got fossil fuels into the text in Dubai. So it may sound crazy, but it's taken us 28 COPs to just drag fossil fuels to center stage and pull back the curtain and show what's really at the core of all of this. The fossil fuel industry didn't want us to be talking about oil, gas, and coal, and they certainly didn't want us to be constraining those record profits and their products. So they made it about our carbon footprint so we'd feel guilty. So they denied climate change and then funded denial. And then when that didn't work, they started flooding the system, making it about CCS and offsets and credits and more system, but the math just doesn't add up. So now we're calling for a fossil fuel treaty with 3 pillars: a just transition to help countries move their economies away from fossil fuels, non-proliferation, a commitment to no more expansion. And we make that analogy of non-proliferation on purpose, because the fact is that I'm old enough to remember when stockpiling nuclear weapons was considered something that kept us safe. And it was because of the nuclear campaigns that we started to realize that stockpiling nuclear weapons was actually what threatened us. Today, fossil fuels are our weapons of mass destruction. They kill more people, just from air pollution alone, than any single thing on Earth. And they are the greatest cause of climate change, which is sweeping our planet. We need to stop their expansion. And we need a fair and funded phase out. So we've been doing research studying 5 other treaties and how we can learn from these treaties. And I'll make this whole presentation available. So I'm going to go quickly now because I have to get back to other meetings here in the UN General Assembly. But we've identified 5 phases towards building a treaty. Right now, we're building political buy-in, and that's where you come in. We need all of your support. And in fact, it's not just that we need it. We need you to make the idea of a fossil fuel treaty your own. We can't build it alone. No one built the Paris Agreement alone. The idea is that individuals, organizations, cities, and states will all join and call for a treaty, creating the social license and political space for our governments to do that. We're also developing all of the research you need to understand what a treaty could look like and the implications of not doing a treaty, and it's all publicly available at fossilfueltreaty.org. Just this week, we released a new report on how fossil fuels are fueling conflict and the connection of fossil fuels to wars and violence and instability around the globe. So here at Climate Week this week, the former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon endorsed the Fossil Fuel Treaty. In the UN Pact for the Future, we fought hard and we were able to get, again, the words fossil fuels and a recognition of the transition away from fossil fuels. As one of my favorite authors, John Valiant, says, I think we're beginning to fall out of thrall with fossil fuels. I think we're starting to see the turning point in the social norm, the tipping point in how we're talking about these issues, and the shift in politics and power. Because make no mistake, this isn't just about decarbonization. This is about power in every sense of the word. The Fossil Fuel Treaty is now supported by 14 nation states, a new one yesterday on the floor of the UN General Assembly, by hundreds of cities and subnationals, including California, the first one of the largest states to join the Fossil Fuel Treaty and the 5th largest economy in the world, passed a resolution in the House and in the Senate. I'm proud to say Vancouver was the first city to join the Fossil Fuel Treaty 4 years ago, I don't even think we had a website by then. Over 800 parliamentarians have joined, thousands of scientists, now even banks. You can help us by endorsing the Fossil Fuel Treaty as an organization or an individual, promoting the videos, promoting the work online, organizing in your community to get more individuals. Because the fact is, together we are so much more powerful than we are apart. Some say that this idea is too big, it's too bold, it's too new. But I think here in this room, we know that we need big, bold, new ideas, that we don't have time for more of the same. I hope that you're as inspired by this growing global movement as I am, and that you'll join us, because together we can ensure a fossil fuel treaty. Thank you.
Thank you. Tzeporah. Hello. Thank you so much for that inspiring and amazing presentation, Tzeporah. We are very, very, very proud that a Canadian has done this fabulous, heroic path. Thank you so much.
So kind of you to say. I mean, I had some big shoes to fill. Let's not forget that if it wasn't for Elizabeth May, we wouldn't have had the Montreal Protocol, one of the agreements that I studied in order to start working on the Fossil Fuel Treaty. So I think, I think we're very lucky in Canada. And in fact, around the world, many of the leaders that I meet in the policy and diplomatic space are all Canadian. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to impose on your time away.
It's okay. I'm okay for a couple more minutes. I know there's going to be a lot of questions, so let me try.
You could take some questions? Terrific.
And then I'll have to run.
Can someone give her a mic?
I'll yell it, you can translate. No, if you don't use the mic, I can't hear you.
Yeah, there she is.
Thanks for this. I was part of a meeting last week with the Non-Proliferation Treaty Campaign in North America, and we were given a chance to look at your theory of change model to push forth. The treaty, I thought it was fascinating. I recommend everybody to go to the website and look at it and study it. My question, though, is the City of Ottawa has endorsed the treaty, but has done nothing. What should cities who have endorsed the treaty be doing, like going forward?
That's a great question. Oh, I get an echo. Can you hear me normally? Is it fine? Okay. So first of all, we're asking cities to formally send letters and to meet with their federal governments and encourage them to start working towards a fossil fuel treaty and to endorse and become one of the bloc of nations that's starting to develop a treaty. So we need cities to engage, and as more cities start to come on board, they can do that. Secondly, they could start to create awareness events so that more people know about a fossil fuel treaty. But I think most importantly, at a city level, they should be ensuring that they have all the policies in place to ensure an end to the expansion of fossil fuel, both production and use. And there's a great program by Stand Out Earth. Some of you know I co-founded Stand Out Earth, the NGO. And when we started getting these questions from cities, we developed a program. It's called Safe Cities Program at Stand Out Earth. And the Safe Cities Program has been doing research looking at different jurisdictions and what capacity they have on different fossil fuel issues to be able to put in place kind of policy recommendations by jurisdiction. And we're also looking at what different jurisdictions are doing and then showing how they did it and really trying to amplify that and creating a network of city officials at the bureaucratic level that can talk to each other, because a lot of this is very new. And so there's a piece around making sure the city is doing what it can within its own jurisdiction, and also using its ability as an advocate to call on the federal government or national government.
Hi, my name's Jeff Passmore, longtime friend of Elizabeth May and perpetual voter for the Green Party. You mentioned a number of subnationals that have joined and companies and so on. Have you ever looked at the insurance companies? Because insurance drives commerce, and Munich Re, for example, has long ago stopped insuring coal plants. So if you can't get insurance, you can't build. And they're now also no longer going to insure tar sands, oil sands plants, or any infrastructure associated with that. I deal with their Chicago office, and if you want, I can put you in touch with somebody there, and because you really should be looking at insurance. That part of the market is going to drive the solutions.
That's a great idea. I love the idea of reaching out to insurance companies. I think that's brilliant. But how about my team, our team, the Secretariat, sends you any information that you need, and you reach out to the insurance firms? A lot of people ask me.
Sure.
A lot of people ask me what they can do, and I've been saying here in New York, make it your own. No,
I can do that.
Or one person. There you go. Our first commitment. No one organization or one person can do this. It's going to take a movement. It's going to take all of us. And it's a mistake for us to just, write a check or click here and sign someone else's initiative and then wait for someone else to do things. And when I first started looking at this issue of fossil fuel supply side policy and production, well, first I thought I was crazy because a lot of people was telling me I was crazy. But then, it also, I kept thinking, but if this is true, someone else must have done it. At this moment in history, we need to do everything we can. And so that requires us treating it like a job. Make your strategic plan. Think about the time that you have and the energy that you have and your own connections, and then make a plan. And don't try and reinvent the wheel. Too often I see people, I'm going to create my own organization to do this, and I'm going to create, and then they spend so much time doing organizational development and fundraising, they don't get any work done. Join with each other. Join existing organizations. We really don't have time to not be effective and to not be focused right now. And so thank you for that commitment. And let us know if you need help. That's what the Secretariat is here to do, the Global Secretariat that we've built. We're about 40 people based in 36 countries now. And we're providing talking points and theory of change analysis, and really our team will do what you need. You just need to tell us what you need, and in order to make the idea fly, and then we hope to provide you with that support.
Thank goodness that you're not crazy. Thank goodness that you're not crazy and you're an extraordinary leader. Roy?
Yeah, if there's one more, I can take it, but yeah, just one, and then I'm going to have to go.
Tzeporah, as you know, is this working?
Yeah, it's working.
Ontario is a province which relies principally or mostly on nuclear power, and there's a growing number of people who are endorsing nuclear power as a way out, including small modular reactors. What are your views on these opinions and the role of nuclear power in the future going forward?
Look, this may be unpopular with some of my other environmental colleagues, but I think it's a mistake at this moment in history to be decommissioning existing nuclear facilities, because every ton of carbon matters. And that has to be one of the main metrics we use right now. That doesn't mean I think we should be building more nuclear, though. Because, look, our job is to build social license for renewable energy, for the cleanest and safest renewable energy, and to make sure that those electric vehicles and that battery storage and that critical mineral mining is the best that it can be. But a couple of things on all of that. First of all, nuclear power takes a long time to build, and it's expensive. And we could have renewables at scale much quicker and faster and cheaper in almost every jurisdiction in the world. Second of all, you've all seen the ads and the memes going around about how electric vehicles and renewable energy are just as bad for the planet. That is baloney. The majority of mining on this planet right now is for fossil fuels. So yes, critical mineral mining is mining, but it's going to be far less mining than a fossil fuel dependent system. Fossil fuels are the most inefficient potential energy source that humans could use. 40% of our ships on the planet are just to move fossil fuels around from place to place. So look, this system is inefficient, it's gigantic, and it is actually perpetuating itself. So much mining and drilling is essential just to keep the system itself going. There is nothing that is going to be perfect. We have an impact on this planet, and a massive impact on this planet. But right now, if we're going to have a choice of doing it better, then we have to reduce how much carbon is getting trapped in our atmosphere, and that has to be our priority.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to go. I thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate all that you're doing, and I wish you all the best for the rest of your conference.
Elizabeth, did you want to say something? You're on mute, I think.
Oh,
You're
no, Susan.
Great.
No, I don't think I'm on mute.
You aren't anymore.
Can you hear me now? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Listen, I just wanted to add, I agreed with everything Tzeporah just said. I don't think anyone's advocating for shutting down existing nuclear capacity. But I just wanted to flag for this room, and I'll do it very quickly, that the so-called SMRs are a scam. If you missed it during the Harper years, SNC-Lavalin bought Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, a crown corporation into which Canadians had poured billions of dollars, was sold to SNC-Lavalin for about $15 million. They have converted themselves into, they are the main shareholder of Canadian Nuclear Laboratories. They actually are doing business with for-profit manufacturers of nuclear weapons, the Pentagon, and in the UK. And the SR concept doesn't exist. It's a hypothetical, imaginary, someday we might have small modular reactors. It's not like you order that at a catalog. So this is a scam, it's a huge opportunity cost. Of course, renewables at scale are cheaper. You can get solar power at 3 cents a kilowatt hour. It rolls out fast, and very worried of like what is your path to net zero without nuclear. That's just that's just a lot, and it will help reduce
Elizabeth, you're breaking up a bit. But what we hear is that it's as ineffective as carbon capture, but more dangerous and expensive.